Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. Today, the show is all about family, and we have entitled it The Understanding Family Constellation. We all belong to a family constellation, and you want to know more about what it is, and certainly we need to dig deeper about it, because family is the main cell of society. And this is not something old-fashioned, blah, 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 that we're talking about. We're talking about the highest definition brought in by the superior spirits. When Allan Kardec, in the Spirit's book, brought to us the following question 775, what would be the result for society if family ties were relaxed? And the answer of the illuminated minds was a magnification of selfishness. Later, in the Gospel According to Spiritism, Chapter 14, Item 8, there is a whole explanation about two types of families. Families of spiritual ties and family of blood ties. It's quite interesting because if we go back to the first answer that Kardec received at his time, we're going to get to know that if we do not give the proper importance, the proper value to family, we are just going to magnify selfishness. And you, dear listener, may be right there saying, well, but this is exactly what's happening in the world today. And you're right. For sure, because we have given less importance to family in detriment to the importance of the individual. And we shall go to its balance. And that's why Kardec Radio is dedicating the program today to understanding about how important our family ties are. Because after all, why are we here in this life? Is there by any way it means another reason but to work on our relationships? And where do they begin? At home. We are also going to rely upon a great book that is already in English entitled Family Constelation, which was brought in by the medium Divaldo Franco, and the spirit author is the renowned and the expert in spiritist psychology, Joanna de Angelis. There in this book, you will find the whole 9 yards about family constellation. Let us just open up with her great understanding of it. She says in the first chapter, the family is undoubtedly the safe fortress for the individual to protect himself from the outside world's aggressions. In it, it acquires valuable resources such as psychological maturity, knowledge, and experience, all crucial for a joyful journey in society. Not always understood, especially nowadays, family remains the primary school of the utmost importance for the personality's foundation and its effective development, through which the spirit acquires ultimate happiness. This and much more later on. Joanna de Angelis is going to tell us about family as a school of blessings, where we learn the essential duties towards a joyful life. Without family, ideals lose strength, aspirations become numb, and moral resistance is weekend. It's quite interesting because it's precisely what's happening nowadays. When many people talk about teenagers having no ideals, we just wonder if their parents do have greater ideals in life. Because if they are not stimulated at the core of their childhood, they barely will blossom in that regard unless they are really what we call an old soul. But that's an exception. According to psychology and spiritism, majority of children. As André Louis says in a book that is entitled Mechanisms of Mediumship, through the hands of Chico Xavier, majority of our children will be a mere reflex of their parents' mind. And it is sad because we want to progress at each generation, and it's very important. So that's why we need to go back to the root, knowing about our family constellation. As Joana de Angelis mentions in another chapter in this fascinating book, Family Constellation, through Divaldo Franco's hand, Joana de Angelis wrote to us, a family constellation is comprised of similar spirits, either attracted to one another through noble realizations of love or serious and disturbing commitments from previous lives. Well, dear listener, there is much to consider here. Reincarnation, spirit influences in our lives, what we call spiritual obsession, unconscious elements that are actually depending upon these and many other elements, as Allan Kardec mentions in the book Genesis. He says, we carry with us all the thought forms that we create in this life. And other people who are more sensitive can quite clearly go into that mental field of ours and consciously or unconsciously grasp the dynamics of all of our thoughts and feelings. And these other minds can be incarnated, discarnated. When Allan Kardec asked the question, which type of spirits are constantly surrounding us? This is in the Spirit's book, in Chapter 8, Part 2, when he talks about spirit intervention. And the answer is fascinating because Kardec is going to share with us that 4 types of spirits are usually accompanying us in our day-to-day life. First and foremost, a more elevated type of spirit, more elevated than us for sure, our spirit guides or guardian angels or whatever we want to call protecting spirits, they are the ones who are constantly with us. Second type of spirits that are constantly with us, more than we imagine, familiar spirits. Spirits who like us from previous lives or this life and they discarnated and they like us. Not necessarily though, they are more evolved. If they are more evolved, they're going to help us. If they're not too evolved, they're going to partake in our family squabbles and they are really going to complicate things. And that's when an argument, a very small thing escalates to bigger things because we have family spirits in the spiritual realm that are partaking in that and they are creating greater complication or helping us. There is a third type of spirit that is probably constantly around us. They are neither a protecting spirit nor a family spirit. They are simply those who have affinity with us. Not necessarily they like us, but they like what we do. If we like reading a good book, other spirits who like reading good books may be surrounding us. But if we like smoking, there are spirits who are still addicted to smoking and to drinking, etc. They may be just joining us, and that's when addictions may escalate. Not because they are obsessors per se, but simply because they are alike in our day-to-day choices. So sometimes changing habits become complex because we have spiritual company partaking in our day-to-day habits. Finally, the 4th category of spirits that may be surrounding our day-to-day lives and our family lives as well, the so-called obsessors, the ones who really don't like us or don't like a family member, they don't want us to be happy or they are jealous of our happiness, and then they create a lot of complications from mental disturbances to physical diseases and much, much more. Dear listener, we're giving you a grasp of all these elements before we actually go deeper into this understanding of our family constellation. And you may have heard the fact that in the past more than 30 years, a specific technique to treat the dynamics of our family, entitled Systemic Constellations, was put together and developed by Bert Hellinger, according to an article wrote by Gloria Coelho, who is actually here with us at Kardec Radio. And Gloria Coelho, who is the president of the Caritas Spiritist Society in Boulder, Colorado, is going to be here with us to tell us more about her experience on this and bridging it up with some elements in Spiritism. And to have even greater help, she has brought in to our company here at Kardec Radio, Jen, a good therapist and friend of Gloria, who is here with us. Jen Rupp, she actually is a reverend and has been working on her healing practice for more than 35 years, and you can access her website at www.caretakingthesoul.com. They are going to be helping us understand more about this specific therapeutic technique that is so valid and so important to empower the families and resolve many traumas and issues that happen and have happened in previous generations, sometimes in our lives, in our family lives. And if you want to also, some people are asking here, if you want to get a hold of the Caritas Spiritist Center, just go to their website, www.caritasspiritistcenter.org, and get to know more about the fantastic work they are doing there. Well, I know I have talked a lot, and this is just a brief introduction, by the way, about the much exciting topic we have to discuss here today. The goal at Kardec Radio is to bring the Spiritist perspective on family, to empower you to live a better life in your family, in spite of all the challenges that are happening nowadays, plus to give you also a psychological tool, a technique that is already working quite well in the world, systemic constellations, and you can probably find a good therapist where you are, even in Brazil. People, Spiritist friends whom I know of, they've got to know good therapists there as well, all around the world, that can work with you and your family members, etc., on bringing new healing to the psychological aspect in your family. For now, we would like to give a new boost to the program with this beautiful message brought in by Joanna De Angelis in the book Happy Life. Right after the break, Jen Rupp and Gloria Coelho will be here with us talking about this special technique, systemic constellations.
Do not be too ambitious. Do not let your reach exceed your grasp, tells a popular saying. Exaggerated ambition maddens when it does not make unhappy before. Fight for what is necessary, sharing what you do not need, which is certainly needed by others.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Available for purchase the book, This Obsession, psychographed by the medium Francisco Cândido Xavier. In this book, the spirit André Luiz recruits new groups of workers of goodness whose intent is to aid in the readjustment of those no longer in the physical plane. Learn more by purchasing your copy at www.sgny.org.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Listen to our sister radio, Bazera Online Web Radio, retransmitting Kardec Radio shows 3 times a day. Also beautiful and inspiring programs in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to www.spiritist.com.
Eternal Bonds of Love is a poignant account of a young man's afterlife experiences after his death at age 20. Ricardo passed after an accidental fall at college on September 18, 2005. He started communicating through written messages to his father on July 2006. In July 2007, he communicated to his parents that they would be writing a book together to be finished and published in 1 year's time. And so they did. You will find in this unusual book Ricardo's story about his experiences, feelings, emotions, and spiritual development in the first 2 years after his untimely and unexpected passing. He shares his stages of evolution, his new life changes in his body and habits, and the people he encounters along the way. Through his verses, one is carried away to another reality where love, compassion, understanding, and spiritual growth are the dominant features and goals of those living life after death. Eternal Bonds of Love is comforting, hopeful, and inspiring, and teaches us that true love has no boundaries, no limits, that time and space are illusions, and that love binds us together eternally wherever we are. Purchase this book by visiting the SSB online bookstore at www.ssbaltimore.org. And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we're talking about family constellation. As Allan Kardec reminds us, family is where everything begins, and we shall certainly take responsibility because it's beyond giving material things. Joana de Angelis, in this book entitled Family Constellations Through the Hands of Divaldo Franco, the Medium, she writes in chapter 10, the child is a malleable clay waiting for the diligent hands of the potter that will give it shape and content. The skillful potter is the educator that should shape the distant social being so that it can build a harmonious society. The peace of the world depends on the education of children. When the child is capable of leading others, it is preparing itself to lead the human groups later on in life in the different areas of existence, oftentimes resulting in the command of people and nations. It's quite interesting because many parents nowadays, they simply wash their hands, much like Pontius Pilate, we would say. They really don't engage in their responsibility. They really look at children as if, they're just born that way. What can I do? Well, what should you do? Instead of saying, what can I do? What should you do? Because it's much a responsibility. And it begins in prenatal life. Everything we're teaching to our children in prenatal life is going to greatly impact later on. Science has been telling us, and neuroscience especially tells us about the development of the brain and the body during the time that we're gestating a child. Both father and mother shall take responsibility on what's happening to that spirit during that time. And at the very final parts of the book, Joana de Angelis talks about the importance of family integration. She says, today the family is regarded as a conglomerate of people belonging to a bloodline group, and the majority of them find themselves in distress, suffering horrendous conflicts and vigorous destabilization. Distanced from one another, parents and children live their own lives in the existential scenario without the interpersonal communication that is essential to the understanding of all the relevant issues and challenges that multiply manifold. The laws of affective identity separates the members that compose the family, preserving the selfish interests to which each one clings more in intense struggles between the various members, always disputing for the most lucrative peace. And she goes on, reminding us that we should count on the whole family constellation to balance ourselves out. And when she talks about constellation, she talks about parents, children, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, other type cousins, neighbors, the family at school, and later on the extension of it at work. So she really brings to us a new understanding, bridging up spiritism to psychology in a quite phenomenal way. And to help us understand more about our families, nowadays there is a great technique that has been available to the world, systemic constellation. We are mentioning here at Kardec Radio a therapeutic technique to be used in the expert's office. We're not telling anybody to bring the technique into the Spiritist Center, because the Spiritist Center is all about the teaching of Spiritism. But we shall refer our attendees to resolve their issues in the doctor's office, whether they have physical problems, psychological issues, and that's what we're doing at Kardec Radio, bringing to you, dear listener, the understanding of a fantastic technique, systemic constellation, that was developed a while ago. Well, I'm no expert in the field, and that's why we have invited both Gloria Coelho, the president of the Caritas Spiritist Center in Boulder, Colorado, and Jen Rupp, a good friend of Gloria Coelho, and also a reverend and a specialist in systemic constellation. She has a healing practice for more than 35 years, and you can go to her website, caretakingthesoul.com, to get to know more of her work. Hi, Gloria. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for being Kardec Radio today.
Good morning.
Vanessa.
Thank you so much. We are talking about systemic constellation. Gloria, you were the first one that brought to my knowledge years ago that this technique existed. Can you tell us more about your work in the Caritas Center and how else you got to know of systemic constellations?
Oh, well, I have my friend Jan and also another friend, Elmar Dornberger, both of whom are expert facilitators, highly trained in this method. And I have participated in many of these systemic family constellation workshops and have been extremely impressed by the work, the possibilities, the outcomes in the way of inner transformation that I have seen. And I found that this work utilizes certain mediumistic elements to bring about healing within families that can span many generations. Mm-hmm. So, it's just a very fascinating technique, a unique approach to the healing of the individual as well as the family in many generations. So even ancestral healing can happen in a family constellation workshop. So it's really quite interesting and worth looking into.
No, yes, certainly the reincarnatory elements play also a huge role in what I understood a little bit about the unconscious elements here. And Kardec mentions about, he never mentions about the word systemic constellation because it's a term that was coined in modern times, but he talks much in many of his books about how previous lives experiences can play a huge role in future generations, either because we are the very ones who reincarnate or because certainly there are spiritual influences. And I'll never forget, as you were mentioning this, an article that I read on the magazine of the Medical Spiritist Association in Brazil. and they mention about a case in which a man who came to regression therapy, and he had asthma problems, and later during regression he found out that he was the very child whom his mother had aborted, and the respiratory problems that he experiences in this life is actually a consequence, a byproduct of that abortion. And it's quite interesting because through that process they got to the healing as well. So sometimes that missing person or the element in the family is the very one that's reincarnated and is brought to life. But the question we have here, Gloria and Jen, this technique has been brought to life for more than 30, 40 years. Is that right?
Yes, it is. It has been all over the world. It's been slower growing in the United States, but it is growing more and more and more. And it's a very profound way of entering and understanding unresolved family traumas.
Mm-hmm. So it's very strong in Europe.
Very strong, and in many other places in the world.
And just a curiosity, why do you think it's that slow in the United States?
I think part of that is because America or the United States started, I should say more accurately, with people escaping and running from their histories, et cetera, leaving because of religious persecution or threat of imprisonment or starvation, et cetera. And people came here and just said, okay, we're individuals, that's all. And it's created a lot of chaos in the United States. And a lot of people have lost their roots within their families through this.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. The context is quite fascinating. So, when you talk about healing the family, as you mentioned, this factor, you must need to be ready to face news that probably you're not expecting, like something new that you want to heal, but sometimes people don't have courage. So what is right?
I think you have to face the fact that just as an individual has a soul, a family also has a collective soul. You know, the British biologist Rupert Sheldrake talks about the morphogenetic field, and each family has its own field that connects all the members, both incarnate and discarnate, you see?
Yes.
And so you can't just pretend that you have no ties to your family. You know, as Jan was just saying, our history has kind of developed this idea of rugged individualism in our country, and we forget that we have these ties and that they are intrinsic to our health, our well-being.
And I would also like to interject here that anything that is unhealed in the family, no matter how far back, it doesn't disappear. It morphs a little bit and will show up maybe every generation, but at least every 2 or 3 generations, and it will look a little bit different perhaps, so it's not totally recognized, but it's that same trauma and that same family member or family members begging for, number one, being remembered and being healed. So it creates this amazing traumatic reenactment, and this work has been such a gift that it can identify even things that we don't know about that have happened in the family and in the family soul, so that all members can begin to heal. And it crosses time. If someone's been dead and perhaps earthbound or reincarnated with the same wounds, it will help them to heal. So it's a huge interdimensional healing that happens.
It's so interesting you two are mentioning that, because remember an excerpt on this very book, on this very article that Gloria wrote. She mentions about the fact that we can't run away from these reasons for exclusion in our family. For example, when a child is given to abortion or to adoption or abortion, suicide, early death, insanity, incarceration, divorce, sexual preference, legitimate birth, and she mentions about joining a different religion or simply falling out between family members. So as you're mentioning, there is no way we can escape from it. But it's funny because that's what families do. They hide it.
Yes.
They pretend it doesn't exist, and it's going to be, let's say this way, reverberating for generations.
Yes. And again, we don't have the context anymore where that doesn't mean it's going to stop reverberating and on some levels damaging people until we're willing to face what has happened and invite every family member back in. Anyone that's excluded will show up through someone else or reincarnate through the family and say, do you remember me? And of course, if we refuse to remember, then again the trauma will repeat. It may change a little bit, but it will be very similar. So therefore, for us to face the facts lovingly, to not judge or blame, and to give responsibility back for those who may have done inappropriate things, because sometimes in families even murders and robberies may happen through a family member. They don't get excluded, but they carry the responsibility of their own actions. And when this is all taken care of, it releases this pressure on other family members to keep doing the traumatic reenactment so they too can live more full and whole lives.
It's so interesting you're saying all of this, because our tendency is to keep it quiet, secretive, and aside from our lives, thinking that all those issues in our family lives are going to be hidden for eternity. And Spiritism and Systemic Constellation is telling us, no, you have to resolve it. Otherwise, it's not going to go away. It's actually going to be like haunting you for life. And it's fascinating because as you're saying this, I find a correlate in the very Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 14, at the very end of the chapter, when they talk about the importance of reincarnation to resolve these issues, they say this very thing. During reincarnations, the same spirits seek one another out in order to group together as they did in the spirit world, and from this, united and homogeneous families are born. And if during their pilgrimages they are temporarily separated, they will find one another later, happy for their latest progress. But since they must not work only for themselves, God allows less advanced spirits to incarnate among them in order to receive counsel and good examples in the interest of their own advancement. These spirits sometimes cause trouble, but that is what comprises the trial. That is where the task lies. Therefore, welcome them as brothers and sisters. Come to their aid, and later in the world of spirits, the family will be happy for having saved castaways, who in turn will be able to save others. It's fascinating because it's also talking about the importance of facing this instead of putting it aside, right?
Absolutely. In fact, the family system or the family soul, I would prefer to say, is demanding that it eventually be faced. And the more we refuse, the more pain there is in the family and the more disconnection there is in the family.
So Jan and Gloria, do you have would you like to share a case that would exemplify the healing of a family towards that direction, something that was just left aside and was brought to light through the technique of systemic constellation, and the family found greater healing?
Well, there are many, many stories. I've been doing this work for many years now and have a great love and passion for it because of the great healing it leads to. But a simple story, some are very complex. I was working with a man several years back, actually, who was from a Jewish family. And some of his family members died in Auschwitz and others were shot to death during World War II in the forests of Russia, etc. And the whole family, number one, the mother was still alive. She was in her mid-80s. She was quite angry and didn't share much. And, of course, understandably, she was angry about all the pain and suffering and trauma she had gone through. And her children were quite disconnected. And particularly, I was working with a child who was told, he was now in his 60s, was told he was the oldest child. And as we were working through several layers of the family trauma, there was always this discomfort, agitation, etc., until I did a little experimentation within that morphogenetic field and placed a child that was actually older than the man man told he was the oldest child, and the whole constellation settled in with the acknowledgement. And it was interesting in this situation, since the mother was still alive, I did suggest he not stress his mother since she was in her mid-80s about this, but he did call her despite that. And when he talked to her, she was very silent for a couple of minutes, and what she said to him then is, just tell that woman Jan that she's right, there was another child. So again, the family was always confused because there again was an excluded family member that was never talked about, and the family could settle in more and find what's called in this work their right places. What I find, if we don't understand our birth order and who we really are in our family, because so many children will take over as parents or as best friends to a parent, if that doesn't get straightened out, that's where many people can't find their place in life. And when the simple role in the family is cleared up, much of the rest of it clears up with it. It's really fascinating.
Wow. That's very empowering, right?
Yes.
But, but Gloria, when we talk about the systemic constellations, now let us give an idea to the public who is not familiar to it. Gloria and Jen, how does it work? What is the dynamics of the therapy, just so people can picture it?
Do you want to start, Gloria, or would you like me to?
I'll start, and then you fill in more details. It's the premise. It's based on the premise that, as I mentioned earlier, that we are all vitally connected to our family in ways that affect our well-being and our health on every level. And so this, what Jan was referring to as the family soul, is the collective field of the family that, just like water seeks its own level, it wants to balance the energies of a family in the best possible way. And so I think one of the fascinating things about systemic constellations is that, as exemplified in the example that Jan just gave about this family member who didn't know that he had an older sibling that had been shut out of the family and never talked about, who had died. The constellation work will reveal these things so that we can address them and heal them. And I think that is a very fascinating element of this work.
And I would like to share a little bit, Gloria, about how it actually happens. I think that's part of what Vanessa was asking. Sometimes it's done in fact, frequently it's done in groups. I also do individual work, but clients will call and say they want to do work, and we'll have anywhere from 7 to 15 people, and I usually do it right in my own home. My office is in my home, and people will come with their issues, and we will choose who's working. The person comes and sits near the facilitator in this situation. It's me. And I will ask them what pressing issue is up for them, and they will state. They could state a health issue. They could say, I always feel so angry, or I feel unloved, etc. And I will ask only about some history of the family, not what goes on emotionally, but the actual history of the family, who's in the family, etc. And from that, I help them decide who to place, which means they're going to choose people to represent all these family members and the issues. They would choose someone to be the anger or the sadness or whatever, and they are placed by the client kinesthetically in this morphogenetic field, which is a field of wisdom or a field of knowledge. And once they're placed, they can't be told to sit down, lay down, whatever, but they're given autonomy, but they're asked to let go of their own lives. And within moments, people are beginning to share what they're feeling there. And through this prolonged, well, it's not really that prolonged, but through this process, we unfold and people begin to know exactly the history of the family and what's happened that has led to this issue for the client. And beyond that, it's steps towards healing and resolving that issue. And it's amazing the immediate response in the family soul and for that client specifically.
Hmm. So thank you so much for clarifying this, because now we can probably more greatly understand where some of the reincarnatory and spiritual elements may come and play a role, right?
Yes.
I remember Gloria mentioning about she says in her article, in spiritist terms, such entanglement could be the result of an ancestor in spirit attaching to or obsessing the family member whose characteristics and or life circumstances come to resemble those of the ancestor. And Gloria, when you mention this, you're saying because the people who are there may be not familiar with the depth of the issues in your family, and they start bringing those issues up as if they were the very people in our family.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Well, that's the really impressive aspect of the work, is that people with absolutely no training, when they are asked to represent a member of a family whom they have never met, right? They don't know anything about this person who they're representing, and yet, they start out, the facilitator begins by just having them stand there and notice how their body feels, to take their attention to their body rather than their mind, because if you intellectualize, then, you're going to block the feelings that are coming through. And so you pay attention to your body and how it's feeling standing there. And that's when you start, noticing different things. And what you're doing is you're tuning in to the person whom you're representing. And even people with absolutely no experience in mediumship, for instance, will start to have feelings and thoughts that relate to the person whom they're representing. And, of course, the person whose issue is being constellated can validate, yes, that's exactly what my mother would have said, or yes, that's exactly what my uncle would have said, you see.
And I'm going to throw in a little practical example, Gloria, and then you can continue. I have a situation in which someone's great-grandfather was represented. The person knew very little the representative knew very little about the great-grandfather, except that he was the great-grandfather. And within moments, standing in their place, they'll say, "Oh, my leg really, really hurts. I can hardly stand on it. It's terrible." And then we'll find out from the client that the great-grandfather was shot in the leg during World War I, and the client standing there now is feeling that pain.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how it works.
It's amazing.
And the safety of it is another very impressive thing, because the facilitator is very highly trained. And just as in spiritist circles, the guides ensure it's the intention of the medium, or in this case, the facilitator, to bring about the highest level of healing to this family. The guides who are there working with the facilitator and the participants ensures, the safety of the work. So I have never seen, I've been in so many constellation workshops, I have never seen anything that I felt was unsafe going on.
And here again, people should check that they have a very well-trained facilitator. On the surface, this work can look quite simple, but it is very complex. And the facilitator has a big job of holding that safety and unconditional love and all those kinds of things so that spiritual growth and healing can happen.
It's quite a spiritual technique. But, Jen, if people who are listening to us want to find out where they can find a good practitioner on systemic constellation, where do they go?
Well, there are many, many websites. There's Baird Hellinger's, but there are many. If people were to Google, you might say, either family constellation work or systemic constellation work, and look for facilitators, you get huge numbers. And there are many ways of, many, many websites of checking that out and checking credentials, etc.
Okay, great. So we're going to give a short break, Laura and Jen, and when we come back, we'd like to know a little more about the issues that usually come up and the extended benefits of the technique, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
We will return to our program after these messages.
A new masterpiece has just been released by EDI CEI of America, Memoirs of a Suicide by Yvonne Pereira, a phenomenal book about what happens to suicides in the afterlife. Truly instructive, it brings greater hope that no one really dies or spends eternity in damnation. A true account of the mercy and providence of God. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Come for the beautiful event sponsored by the British Union of the Spiritist Societies. It is the second British Spiritist Congress on May 11th and 12th at the Quakers Friends House in London, United Kingdom. For more information, please go to www.buss.org.uk.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Are you seeking a way to tap into more spiritual you? Try meditation. As the Spirit Joanna DeAngelis says, meditation becomes an effective way to discipline the will. In the meditative state, you calm down your emotions and clarify your discernment, harmonizing your feelings. Take a listen to a clip from the CD entitled Health by Divaldo Franco and Joanna DeAngelis.
So say this: I am life, and a triumphant life. Say it again, and once again. Say, I am happiness in life. Repeat it. I am fulfilled, and so I shall remain. Look at yourself. You are irradiating His light. Again, look at yourself. You are irradiating His light. Breathe it. Hold it. Breathe out. Say to yourself, nothing of a disturbing nature deserves my attention.
If you want to listen to more, you can purchase your own copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org/bookstore.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we're talking about our very family constellation. Joanna DeAngelis in the very book Family Constellation, brought in by the mediumship of Divaldo Franco. He brings to us the teachings of Joanna DeAngelis when she says about the importance of dedicating time to our families, really making sure that our family is healed and doing well, and the importance of counting on the many members of the family, never disregarding anyone, because traumas can be created, and according to Spiritism, we'll have to come back and resolve it. We cannot run away. Any family member that is really astray from the family will be brought back to our awareness. We cannot escape from it. And systemic constellation is a beautiful therapeutic technique that has been in this world for more than 30 years and can help a lot the healing of the family. Again, as we were saying at the beginning of the program, when we bring this discussion on systemic constellation work, we're not advising you to bring this technique to the Spiritist Center. No, because Spiritist centers are places where we teach about Spiritism. But we're saying, if you need it, if somebody who comes to the center is in need of a psychological help, then please refer them. If family is a major issue, send them. Refer to good therapists in systemic constellation so they can heal themselves. It's much like what we talk about nowadays, the importance of interprofessional work. We need to learn everything that is happening in the world so we can recommend, refer people so they can live and lead a better life. And we can see many spiritual elements in this technique. So this is one other reason we're bringing to your awareness here at Kardec Radio. And to discuss in greater detail, we have two people who have been working on this. Gloria Coelho, who is the president of the Caritas Spiritist Center in Boulder, Colorado, and her friend and the therapist in the field of systemic constellation, Jen Rupp, who has been in the healing practice for more than 35 years. And you can get a hold of their websites. For Jen Rupp's website, caretakingthesoul.com, and for Gloria Coelho's center, CaritasSpiritistCenter.org. Gloria and Jen, when we talk about these issues, what are the most common issues that usually pop up in these family constellation works?
Well, I think that's so broad, Vanessa. Sometimes there's an alleviation of health, meaning an illness will either recede some or understand why the illness has come in. Depression can be resolved. Lots of rage and anger and hostility can be resolved when we understand where it came from and we give it back into history instead of moving forward to the next generation. We give the pain back. Now we understand through the constellation where it came from because we don't always understand that. We now have the understanding and the respectful ability to say, this is yours, and I give it back to you in respect. It's part of your life. And therefore that person can also give whatever responsibility belongs to someone else their responsibility, and there can be healing rather than pushing all this pain into the future.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. And I'm asking about the major issues because sometimes people who are listening to us may think that probably their issue is not the issue for this type of work. So giving them some, as you mentioned, like the broader extent of the issues that are being taken care of will encourage them to really say, this is a technique that can probably help me in my issues as well.
It also helps other people too. Uh-huh. It can also help other family members that are not even present when the constellation is done. As an example of a woman who constellated a family issue that she was having, and I think, I'm not sure, Jan, whether this was a case that you did, but the next day her brother, who knew nothing about the work that had been done, called to tell his sister that after 40 years of abusing alcohol, he had decided to stop drinking, and 9 years later he was still sober.
Yes, and that was the case I worked. Yes.
Yeah.
And I also have another interesting one. I teach at a local Buddhist university a few times a year and do the work with the students. And there was a situation where there was 4 generations at least that had Crohn's disease. And in the constellation, placing the Crohn's disease and the pain of the student that was the client in this situation, when we moved back to the very, very major trauma that had happened a few generations back, she was told before this that she could never have a child and she would never be healthy. And the professor of that class ran into her 3 years later. She was fine. The Crohn's disease was gone. She had gotten pregnant and had a child and was happily married. I mean, there's such a broad range of amazing things that happen.
Wow, that's fascinating. Brings a lot of hope to many people, right?
Yes. I feel blessed by having seen many miracles through the work. I'm sure Gloria has too.
Yes, it's fascinating. It's really therapeutic. And so the first element we would say, need to be courageous to face the struggles. But since you have a facilitator, you're not alone. So there you go. It's also something very active, different from traditional therapy.
Yes.
Right? I think can you compare a little bit just so people understand that this is so much more dynamic and more active. The person is not seated and going through like the complaints of life. It's much deeper than that.
Yes, it's not talk therapy at all. It's not talk therapy. It's just a more of an energetic technique, really, an energetic approach.
And there are words used, but they're very selected words, almost at times very simple phrases stating the truth and stating true feelings, etc. There's not long conversations in the work. And yet it takes us to great resolution and deep understanding. And besides the facilitator being there in groups, what I see is the groups bond so much and have such respect for all the pain we all carry. There's great camaraderie and love within the groups.
That's fascinating because in the Spirits book by Allan Kardec, that's another element that I see very beneficial in this, the dynamics of this therapy, is that when they mention about the law of society, about the fact that we only grow when we are working our relationships and when we are in groups. So even in this therapeutic dynamics, we see the great effect of being with others and resolving our issues and each other's issues through the whole process. So it's something that reinforces the importance of social ties and right? Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And family ties in particular. And, even science has proven now that our ancestors are within our very DNA. They're not gone. Even they can certainly be reincarnated, they could certainly be obsessing, but they literally are also in our DNA.
It's very interesting.
Yes,
what you mentioned here.
There are profound shifts, as individual family members begin to see each other with greater understanding, and that leads to profound shifts in family relationships and personal empowerment as well.
And we can see why if our parents were not present emotionally or if they were abusive, we can begin to see their pain to understand why. And that doesn't excuse what they did, but we can understand it and then move forward.
So you would say, if somebody here asks, so when something is very bad, traumatic, and critical, we're not doomed.
Right, exactly.
No. And one of the outcomes that I have seen over and over, which I think has not been mentioned in this conversation yet, is there is a level of forgiveness that happens because of that understanding.
Yes.
And that's the healing in many cases, is just being able to perceive the family members in a different way. There are shifts that happen in our perception that lead to forgiveness and healing.
Yes, and even though it may look, or we may have the perception we weren't loved, we realize underneath all these behaviors there was still love.
That's interesting. So you've seen quite a high success rate in the technique.
Yes, huge success. I have great love for this body of work because it leads to such huge healing, not just the individual, but as Gloria mentioned a while ago, and I think I did too, it reaches the whole family because we're entering the family soul, that collective soul, and it ripples through the entire family soul for generations.
Wow, that's fascinating. So let's break down a little more on the possible benefits of this.
Well, the benefits are innumerable as far as I'm concerned. They lead to much more spiritual and emotional freedom, forgiveness, more love, more compassion. I mean, just health. Quite often there's health improvements. It really is innumerable, Vanessa, the amazing ripples from the work.
And even sometimes the participants sitting in the room who are not at all related to the family members will experience benefits.
Yes. In fact, one of the theories in the work, which is very true, is each and every person that is in a constellation, that doesn't mean their own, all constellations they're in will receive benefit from that work.
That's interesting. So now let's just, I think we have a caller here, but before we open the line to the caller, we would like to ask Gloria about some of the things, because she was the first one to bring to my knowledge some possible, it's like the spiritist take on the technique of of systemic constellation. Gloria, would you like to share a little bit more, and Jen can also help us in that regard?
Well, I think that it interfaces very much with Spiritist philosophy and the understanding that of reincarnation, and as you mentioned at the very beginning of the program, how our ties with our families span one generation, and we reincarnate within the same family very frequently because of those ties. And so I think that the fact that this work also very often, when we're doing a constellation, a person will represent a discarnate family member, an ancestor who is, it could be 3 or 4 generations back, but that has, suddenly has relevance to the issue that is being dealt with in the circle. And so there is this, this multi-generational aspect of it, which has a lot to do with our spirit, the members of our family who reincarnate maybe in one incarnation. This person might be our mother, and another incarnation it might be our sister or our brother, and those it plays into very strongly the work that is done in family constellations.
Yes. And another thing I would like to add, another thing that we see is because frequently the obsessing or ancestor that is in pain, when their story is told and they feel the compassion, they move on. They're no longer obsessing and demanding they be understood, because so many of these people are judged. It's like, he was never the same after the war. Well, when people get the reality of what that person went through, the atrocities they saw,
yes, I represented a person like that in one of your constellations, Jan. Do you remember?
Yes.
It was a man who had been really traumatized by a war, and when he came back, he just, the family saw him as withdrawing and that he didn't love them anymore. And he, as when I was representing him, we realized that actually what was happening was he felt that he was so affected and traumatized and actually toxic to the family that he withdrew for their benefit, because he was afraid that he was hurting the family by the wounds that he had incurred, psychological wounds that he had incurred in the war, he couldn't keep them from affecting the family, and so he withdrew out of love for the family. And when that came out, it changed everything.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So we have a caller here from Canada, Jay, and apparently he has a question that goes hand in hand with what you're saying. Let's check it out, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Jay. Welcome to Kardec Radio. How are you? Oh, he just dropped. So something happened here, but according to Kirsten DeMello, who was screening here for us, he probably had a question regarding reincarnation. So I think we probably touched on the very subject without even knowing he had such questions. So the spirits are certainly guiding us here. So yeah, so then, as we are saying at the very beginning, there's one more element we'd like to bring to light here that possibly we are just creating hypothesis here about the behind the scenes of this work. Since we talked about the many spirits that are accompanying us in our daily lives, it's possible that during the process we are also as Gloria mentioned, it's almost like a spontaneous mediumship is happening. People are not doing it purposely, but they may be just voicing what the spiritual company of all of us is thinking and feeling, right?
Yes. Well, actually, part of it is also in the setting up and choosing the representatives. There are steps in which you do ask them to, as best they can, let go of their own lives and just feel what's coming up in their body, which would mean physical sensations and emotions. And so there is some hint that I wouldn't use necessarily with them always because they may not have understanding of mediumship, but it happens almost always that a person who's never had an experience of mediumship exactly gets the feelings and the pains and the physical sensations of the person they're representing and articulates them.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, actually, Jay is back. Let me see if we can get a hold of him. Hi, Jay.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being with us at Kardec Radio. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
All right. So would you like to relay your question to our friends, Gloria and Jen?
Yes. I was listening to this conversation. Thanks so much again, ladies. It's interesting that you said forgiveness, too. But I just wondered, I did actually have forgiveness a while back, too, and it really created a whole different situation on things and how the family is now. My question is that how do we actually choose our families in the spirit world to incarnate on this earth and learn about lessons and things like that? And that's one if we go back into the past life stuff. It could be generations and stuff like that beyond the how would you say it, the physical ancestral thing that carries on, but also what about the spiritual stuff, such as, like I said, past life from other things that we come into families again and families again after that to self stuff. I just wondered, how does it happen? Why do we choose our family on this earth plane?
I think that there are a number of factors in the choice, which of course is always assisted by our guides. And depending on our level of spiritual evolution, we have more or less choice in the matter, so that as we evolve and become more aware of who we are and what our needs are, we have more choice in the matter. But we're still guided in our selection by our spirit guides, our spirit mentors. And I think one of the factors is, what do I still need to learn? And when we're in the spirit world, we have a broader perspective on this because we can be more objective about the lives that we have had so far and what we have learned and what we have failed to learn. So that is one of the factors. But another factor, which of course plays very much into this topic that we're discussing, is the ties that we have with the spirits who have been members of our family and it can be a tie of love that we know that we can get the support we need for the work that we need to do from this particular family member, or it can be a tie of unresolved, difficulty or conflict that needs to still be resolved. And so we are brought together again in order to work that out, work through those problems. So
and here again is where it's great assistance to do constellation around those, because they're brought to the conscious mind rather than the unconscious. So you continue, Gloria.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's, that's where the resolution becomes facilitated often, in this work.
That's interesting. Jay?
Hello.
Is there anything else you'd like to ask or share with us?
I just wondered, does it ever get resolved, some of the stuff? Because I just know some people, it seems like it's lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Is there one way to do this? Like, was there the only way to do this is through forgiveness, or is there another way?
Are there any shortcuts? Are you looking for shortcuts? Well, forgiveness is a shortcut, I think, But, until we get to that point where we can forgive, there's often a lot of pain. And so a therapy such as constellation work just helps that process, because it brings to light aspects of the other person that we had never seen before, that we had never known before. And so it helps our understanding, and that leads to forgiveness.
Yes. And again, these things, from what I mentioned earlier about constellation work, it really does help to bring those issues to the surface for resolution. Otherwise, sometimes we just sort of bungle along and keep repeating the same thing over and over. And that's what Spiritism is about, all the assistance we get through Spiritism. And constellation is another way to assist in Spiritism and many other modalities. People that might not reach there could still come, because this is a, in quotes, therapeutic method.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you would say, if I follow through Jay's question, what is the time frame that people usually work out their issues?
Actually, the issue that's presented in a constellation frequently, interestingly enough, goes so deeply into the soul, there is some almost instantaneous resolution if the person is really allowing the unfoldment of the work in their own soul.
I believe, why? Because as Gloria also knows, and Jen, that in these obsession meetings, when we talk to discarnate spirits who have unresolved issues, and sometimes it's like family issues, it's almost like instantaneous. Some people are really like in awe when they begin at the session and they're saying, I hate this person, and then little by little, the counselor and the team of good spirits that are helping the process, they shift. They have therapeutic techniques that later, it's like the very same day, they shifted their consciousness.
Right? Yes, absolutely. I had a woman who asked, came to the center, and she said that her father had died 2 years previously, and she was very close to him. But, she knows that there's a life after death, and so her grief was certainly not extreme in any real negative way. But she was feeling that whenever anyone got sick in the family, she would get overly worried about it, and she was feeling depressed, and she didn't know why. She said, this is not how I've ever been before. And although I miss my father, I can't believe that this is just grief. There's something else going on. And so she said, is there some way you could help me? And I said, well, we could try a disobsession session, because maybe he is, reluctant to leave you, and that can be difficult. And so we did the disobsession session, and I saw her a month later, and she said, "Oh, did you do that session? Because on this day I just felt a shift, and I'm back to myself again." And that was the day that we had done it.
Wow,
and
that's
so
interesting.
yeah, so and the in terms of the family constellation work, sometimes there's a shift that you can see right then and there in the person whose constellation is being done, and other times it comes a little bit later, but it's the same kind of shift, that we're talking about in both techniques.
Okay, wonderful. Would like to thank Jay for your questions. Thank you, Jay, for being here with us and relaying these important questions.
You're welcome. Thanks, ladies.
All right. So we don't want to let you go, Gloria and Jen, but time has come. And we, first of all, would like to thank very much for being with us at Kardec Radio and so kindly sharing this great news that there is this great technique, systemic constellations, at hand for people to bring greater healing to their families. Would please each one of you relay your final comments to Kardec Radio listener?
I would like to relay much encouragement and encourage people to have the courage to take on the things in the family, because your life will be very different. It'll work so much better. I'm sending great love to all those listeners.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Gloria?
And I would just like to say, if you have never experienced this type of work, you can look for a skilled facilitator and try it, because it's really quite very, very interesting, even from the perspective of spiritism and mediumship. It's very interesting.
Okay, and quickly here, we just got a question from Kirsten DeMello. She just sent me a message asking where could someone be trained for to become a facilitator on systemic constellation.
Actually, there are many. If you go to the Internet and do a search, there are many groups in different areas of the United States and around the world that do this kind of training and for people to become practitioners. Some are a year long, some are 6 months long, some are 2 years long. But I also encourage people to go beyond their initial training, because it is a very complex body of work, and it's easy to find those that are offering the training classes.
So the main reference would be the name Bert Hellinger?
Yeah, that would be one of the big ones. But even putting in a search engine, family constellation work or systemic constellation work, and you could also add facilitators or trainings or whatever, and many things will come up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen, and thank you so much, Gloria, for bringing Jen also to our contact here and for bringing this knowledge to us. Thank you so much. We hope to have you more often at Kardec Radio.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you. So, dear listener, we hope you're feeling ever more hopeful, because after this great news, just to know that our family issues can be resolved, that we can find a way out of traumas and struggles and these missing links in our families, brings new life to all of us. And we would like to share with you that this book as well, Family Constellation by Joana de Angelis, Divaldo Franco, tells also about the importance of rescuing our family ties. We can never give up on our families. If we have issues, we have to try it again and again and again and again. As Gloria Coelho kindly shared to us when Jay asked the question, forgiveness is a shortcut, something right to think about. It's food for thought. Forgiveness is a shortcut, and there is much to work in that regard, in regards to our own selves and one another. So we would like to wrap up this conversation on family constellation by reading one amazing excerpt in this book, Family Constellation. When Joana de Angelis opens chapter 14, Education for Courage, and she says, courage, among other definitions, is this intrepidness that develops in human beings so that they may be able to face the confrontations with determination and selflessness, maintaining firmness of mind in any circumstance. Being a result of a good spiritual guidance, courage dignifies and raises the spirit, working its needs and developing the attributes that need to expand. She goes on and says, at home, education for courage is necessary to develop the aspirations of beauty, truth, moral victory, so life's torments and the vicissitudes that appear along the way are properly addressed with determination and willingness to overcome them. Well, this is all that we're talking about, because actually Jesus, in a beautiful passage that he had at his time when he was incarnated, he was talking to Bartholomew, one of his disciples and very close friends. Bartholomew was a depressed man. He loved Jesus and Jesus' message, but much like people nowadays, he felt discouraged in really feeling the joy of life and being courageous. It was when Jesus approached him and asked what was going on, and he said, I love very much your message, Master, but truly I don't see how I can bridge it up in my daily life, because my father is constantly rejecting me, and my brothers really don't understand me. They are often calling me a vagabond, and I don't really know. I lose ground, and I don't know how I'm going to bridge it up, the good news you bring, to my day-to-day life. Much like many of us today, we don't see the bridge. Jesus very kindly smiled at Bartholomew and said, Bartholomew, have you seen any good news not bringing joy? For the disciple, for the one who understands it, we need three main elements in life. We need joy, courage, and hope. Today, dear listener, we hope we have brought to you new reasons why we can face our life struggles and heal ourselves within our family constellation. Right now, we're going to give a short break. When we come back, we have more beautiful segments. Spiritism in Your Life with Dr. Marco and Joyce Magalhães. They are going to talk about the new aspects on family, and then Kirsten DeMello is going to tell us more about aspects in the law of preservation in the Spirit's book, what to eat, and exactly should we eat meat or not, followed by Luis Sergio Moroda, who is going to tell us more about another excerpt of the Gospel According to Spiritism. Enjoy this break. When we come back, there is much more at Kardec Radio for you.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Known as one of the most scientific books by Allan Kardec, The Genesis dives deeper into the origins of our planet to the advent of the new generations to come. Purchase your copy today, online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
The United States Spiritist Council invites you to the 7th U.S. Spiritist Symposium to happen on April 20th in Fort Worth, Texas. The theme of the year is Life in the Spiritual World, the works of André Lewis. More information at www.spiritistsymposium.org.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the Spirit André Louise, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, family sometimes is very challenging, but is the core of our lives. We can't run away. Sometimes we want to give up. Sometimes we don't want to even get in touch with some family members. But the reality is we need to recuperate our strength, go back, resolve, because every issue that is left aside, that is left hidden under the carpet of our hearts, is going to be brought back either in this life or in future lives. There's no other way. We can't run away from it. Family Constellation, the book by Joana de Angelis through Divaldo Franco. If you Google it, you know where to find it. Also, if you want to get a hold of the therapy on systemic constellations, as Jen Rupp and Gloria Coelho shared with us, you can Google it, and you can begin by getting to know of the very man who founded it, Bert Hellinger, a German psychotherapist, or the people, Elmar Dornberg and others, who can relay their expertise to you and can make you be in touch with good facilitators, or even if you want to do the training yourself. For now, we'd like to share with you that Dr. Marco Magalhães and Dr. Joyce Magalhães have prepared a special segment for us today on these very issues in family. Let us listen to these beautiful segments, and at the very end, don't go away, because the final prayer is just so special. It's a moment for us to bring new therapy wherever we are in this world.
Dear Kardec Radio listener, welcome to the segment Spiritism in Your Life. Today, I invite you for a reflection. Did you ever stop for a minute to think about the importance of your family in your life, in your success, in your progress? And when I mention family, I want you to especially think on those directly close to you, like your parents, spouses, and children. Let's think on this on the next 5 minutes. Why the family ties are so important in our lives? Why do I have the parents I have? Why do I have the kids I have? David Wood is a high school counselor with a great experience working with young people and their families. He observed that parents are the child's first and most influential teachers. About 87% of a child's waking hours, from birth to 18-year-old, are under the influence of the home. As a result of their position in the home and participation in the children's development, parents actually are key contributors to the learning process. Several studies have found that the benefits the kids can get from active parents' involvement in their education in a healthy family environment include fewer discipline problems, increased confidence, greater belief in their ability to succeed, high self-esteem, positive attitudes toward school or particular subjects, higher expectation for the future, better social functioning, better student-teacher relationship, lower risk of violence. Also, parents can get a lot of benefits from this good relationship as well, such as increased personal respect and closer relationship with their children, improved attitudes toward education, better relationship with child's peers, and positive relationship with other parents as well. From this quick summary of the up-to-date research, dear listener, you can see some of the benefits of an active and healthy family environment. If you go deeply in these aspects, from the point of view taught by our Master Jesus, you will see that the family ties represent even more to an incarnated spirit. It is actually an essential part in the journey of spirit evolution. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 22, item 3, it says that God has willed for individuals to be united not only through the ties of the flesh, but also through those of the soul, so that the mutual affection of the spouses is extended to their children, and that there should be two instead of one to love them, care for them, and enable them to progress. Also, in the Spirit's book, question 774, the Spirits commented that for humans, there is something beyond physical needs. There is the need to progress. Social ties are necessary for progress, and family ties are summed up in social ties. Hence, Family ties are a natural law. God has thus willed that humans learn to love one another as brothers and sisters. And it goes even further if you go to the question 775, where it is asked, what would be the result for society if family ties were relaxed? The Spirit's answer, a magnification of selfishness. Therefore, dear listeners, the bonds of love generated by family ties are essential steps in our journey of evolution. From these, we can understand how important is the teachings from Jesus. Honor your father and your mother. You can see, dear listeners, that filial devotion, as well as parents' care and love, is not more than an opportunity to practice the general law of charity and love for one's neighbor. As for one cannot love one's neighbor without loving one's father and mother or without loving your children. And this explains how important are the family ties created in every life experience. And also tell us that the best we can do to help ourselves in this journey is to live happy and with love in our family, regardless the problems and difficulties it might have. Therefore, we do have a precious chance to restart now in order to create a new end, and this change should start in our family. In order to finalize our segment today, I want to read a chapter from the book Our Daily Bread, brought to us by Emmanuel through the medium Chico Xavier.
In the family. The struggle in the family is a fundamental problem in the redemption of human beings on earth. How can we be the benefactors to 100 or 1,000 people if we have not, as yet, learned to serve 5 or 10 individuals? This is a logical question, which extends to all sincere disciples of Christianity. A good speaker and a bad servant are two titles that cannot be mixed. The Apostle recommends the exercise of observing compassion in the center of all domestic activities. He does not allude to the compassion that weeps without courage when faced with afflictive enigmas, but rather the one that recognizes the neuralgic zones of the home and strives to eliminate them, mindful of the divine decisions at the propitious time. We know numerous brothers who feel spiritually lonely among those who have entered in their personal family circle through family blood ties, thereby falling into lamentable discouragement. It is crucial, however, to examine these transitory physical bonds, cognizant that there are no causal unions in existence on earth in a family household. Meanwhile, there is a preponderance of renovating and regenerating trials prevailing there. Therefore, let no one fail to take advantage of the sacred field of opportunity to be of service, even though you feel oppressed or overwhelmed by the incomprehension. It will constitute a grave error to overlook the infinite possibilities for illuminating service. It is impossible to try to help the entire world when we fail to be useful in a small home, the one in which the will of the Father situated us on a temporary basis. Prior to making a great personal projection into collective service, let the student learn to cooperate in behalf of his family members of today, convinced that such an effort represents an essential achievement.
So, dear listeners, think on that and start to do good in your family. This is the first step for your progress and for your inner transformation. And God bless us all in this pathway of evolution.
Welcome back, dear Kardec Radio listeners, to the Spiritist Moment. I am Kirsten DeMello. We are giving continuation on our study of Part 3 of the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec. We will be studying specifically the natural divine laws, and even more specifically, the law of preservation, subcategory, voluntary, privations, and mortifications. In question 722, states the following: is the abstention from certain foods prescribed among various cultures based on reason? And the Spirit's answer, quote, everything that humans can eat without harming their health is permitted. Lawmakers, however, have prohibited certain foods with a useful end in mind, and in order to give greater weight on their laws, they have represented them as having come from God, end quote. So we see that it's one major thing is that culturally there are even religions as well that impose this a prohibition of certain foods. And even so, they state it's because God doesn't want us to. But we respect that. And also something very interesting, the first sentence of the answer to 722, the Spirit tells us, enlighten us, that everything that humans can eat without harming their health is permitted. So, which is interesting, it's quite broad. So, but it draws our attention because we know that there is a limit to what we can and cannot eat. As long as we eat things that are good for us, it is permitted. Now, there's plenty of research out there nowadays that show us that anything really in excess is not good for our health, one of which would be red meat, and a slew of other different things. Excessive eating of rice is even bad for even carrots. So everything in moderation is okay, according to the spirits. Without harming our health, it's permitted, because that is key in remembering, before we eat something, we are either fulfilling or transgressing a law of God. How many of us really reflect about that? Do we reflect about that in our daily lives? That what I eat or don't eat can actually transgress the law of God, meaning it goes against. Because if I'm not eating well, if I'm eating things that are harmful to me, then I could be very well aiding and abetting to my own death if I'm eating unhealthy. Something for us to reflect about. Not for us to judge one another or be harsh on ourselves, but just something for us to reflect about, dear friends. Let us go to question 723. Is humankind's use of animals as food contrary to the law of nature? And the Spirit's answer, quote, with your present physical constitution, flesh nourishes flesh. Otherwise, humans would perish. The law of self-preservation imposes on you the duty to preserve your energies and health so that you may fulfill the law of labor. You should, therefore, eat according to the requirements of your own physical organization. So, dear friends, we can see here on one hand, they are not condemning the eating of animals as food, but on the other hand, in the last sentence of this answer, the spirits tell us that we should eat according to the requirements of our own physical organization. So, depending upon our level of evolution, we need different nutrients. For those who have a type of work or job that is very laborious in nature, they need denser fluids that perhaps may come from animals. And there are those who don't have that type of lifestyle, which is neither wrong nor right necessarily, it's all about evolution, that they can live off of other types of proteins and nutrients. We recommend, for those of you who wish to dive a little bit deeper into this study, there is a book that was already published and translated into English. It's called The Spiritual Issue of the Animals by the author Ivonia Prada. She has a chapter in the book towards the end. It's entitled To Eat or Not to Eat Meat. And she quotes Emmanuel from the book O Consolador, which English translation would be entitled The Consoler. This book is not yet in English, but we quote from her book, because she quotes from Emmanuel, the following question, question 129, is it an error for mankind to eat meat? And Emmanuel answers, the ingestion of animals' meat is an error of huge consequences, from which many vices of human nutrition were derived. This is a hurtful situation because even though the human's physical body requires certain vitamins, these nutritional values can be found in vegetable products without the need of slaughterhouses and meat processing plants. And there's actually more to his answer, and he discusses about the need not to go ahead and shut down all these different locations where hundreds of people work, because that also would cause a lot of problems. So we must move ahead gently and slowly, as we are all on a path of progress, but on different levels. So that also must be respected. We know that the animals are our little brothers and sisters to be respected. And ideally, as we become more evolved and the needs of our own physical constitution doesn't necessitate such heavy fluids, then we can eat more vegetables and get our proteins and vitamins and nutrients from other different types of methods.
in the future. As we see now, there are many diets and research that's coming out now about this very topic. But luckily for us, the spirits are kind, and God is kind and knows it's all about our level of evolution and our understanding. So, dear listeners, we always encourage you to go and read, study more about it. Also in the book Missionaries of the Light by Andrea Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is also very good. Different chapters on the behind the scenes in the spiritual realm of the slaughterhouses. Very interesting in the book. We recommend you go and read also the Spirit's book. And until next time, we wish you many blessings.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Want to find a good way to explain life after physical death to kids or teenagers? Check out the book Message from a Teen in the Spirit World by the Spirit Neo Lucio and psychographed by Chico Xavier. In this book, a teenager named Carlos explains his impressions on the new life in the spirit realm with his discarnate relatives and new friends. Purchase your copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org.
The Spiritist Magazine is a trimestral digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
Listen to our sister radio, Bazera Online Web Radio, retransmitting Kardec radio shows 3 times a day. Also beautiful and inspiring programs in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to www.spiritist.com.
The book, A Primer on Being Good by the Spirit May May, psychographed by the medium Chico Xavier, explains in simple language appropriate for children 2 paths in life, the path of good or the path of evil. God has granted us the freedom to choose either one. Purchase your copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org.
Now we return to our program.
My dear friend, we are going to continue our reading of the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, in its first chapter, third topic called Spiritism. We quote Allan Kardec's words, "Spiritism is the new science which has come to reveal to mankind by means of irrefutable proofs the existence and nature of the spiritual world and its relationship with the physical world. It appears not as something supernatural, but on the contrary, as one of the living and active forces of nature, source of an immense number of phenomena which still today are not fully understood, and because of this they are relegated to the world of fantasy and miracles." Christ alluded to this situation on several occasions, and is the reason why much of what he said remained unintelligible or has been wrongly interpreted. Spiritism offers the key by which all can easily be explained. The law of the Old Testament was personified in Moses, that of the New Testament in Christ. Spiritism is then the third revelation of God's law, but it is personified by no one because it represents teaching given not by man, but by the spirits who are the voices of heaven to all parts of the world through the cooperation of innumerable intermediaries. In a manner of speaking, it is the collective work formed by all the spirits who bring enlightenment to all mankind, by offering the means of understanding their world and the destiny that awaits each individual on their return to the spiritual world. Just as Christ said, "I am not come to destroy the law but fulfill it," so Spiritism says, we have not come to destroy the Christian law, but to carry it out. It teaches nothing contrary to what was taught by Christ. Rather, it develops it, explains it in a manner that can be understood by all, and completes that which had previously been known only in its allegoric form. Spiritism has come at the predicted time to fulfill what Christ announced and to prepare for the achievement of future things. It's then the work of Christ who, as he also announced, presides over the regeneration which is now taking place and which will prepare the reign of the kingdom of God here on earth. Well, we would like to add some other points to be clarified about Spiritism. Spiritism will not depend particularly, in thesis, on any human guidance. Spiritism is not an organized religion with hierarchic ranks or paid clergy. It's a philosophical science with moral consequences that go all in the direction of the true Christianity. The word Spiritism was coined by Allan Kardec in the 19th century. It's fully toward the interreligious dialogue and ecumenism, since its motto is, "There is no salvation without love or charity," and not the dogmas. It has come to shed light onto the teachings of Jesus Christ. My dear friend, it is indeed something very, very serious for a doctrine to claim to be the consoler, the spirit of truth that has come to say to us what we could not bear by the time Jesus was physically among us.
We will return to our program after these messages.
The United States Spiritist Council invites you to the 7th U.S. Spiritist Symposium to happen on April 20th in Fort Worth, Texas. The theme of the year is Life in the Spiritual World, the works of Andrea Lewis. More information at www.spiritistsymposium.org.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Would you like to liberate yourself from your life struggles or to find inner balance? The Inner Journey CD has 3 beautiful visualizations that will help you bring harmony to your life. As Joanna DeAngeli tells us to, live in a way that you leave enlightening footprints in your pathway as if they were stars pointing out the pathway to happiness. To find this CD, go to the bookstore on the Spiritist Society of Baltimore webpage, www.ssbaltimore.org. That is www.ssbaltimore.org, and start your inner journey today.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
A new masterpiece has just been released by EDI-CEI of America, Memoirs of a Suicide by Yvonne Pereira, a phenomenal book about what happens to suicides in the afterlife. Truly instructive, it brings greater hope that no one really dies or spends eternity in damnation. A true account of the mercy and providence of God. Buy your copy today at www.ediceiofamerica.com.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Now available for purchase, the book Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century by Guy Léon Playfair. This is the first biographical and critical study in English of one of the outstanding mediums of all time, through whom more than 450 books were received by automatic writing over a 70-year period, few of which, until recently, were available in English translations. Purchase your copy today at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com. www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com.
And now we return to our program.
The following partial recording was taken from the Spirits book by Allan Kardec. The Peopling of the Earth, Adam. Question number 50. Did the human species begin with one single man?
No, the man known as Adam was neither the first nor the only one to populate the earth.
Question number 51. Can we know when Adam lived?
More or less at the time assigned to him, about 4,000 years BC.
Author's remarks for question number 51. The man whom tradition regards by the name of Adam was one of those who somewhere survived one of the great cataclysms that have modified the Earth's surface in different eras. He became the progenitor of one of today's current races. The laws of nature contradict the opinion that the amount of human progress accomplished well before the time of Christ took only a few centuries, which would have had to have been the case if mankind had only come into existence at the date assigned to Adam. Some regard Adam, and with good reason, as a myth or allegory personifying one of the world's earliest ages. The diversity of human races. Question number 52. Where did the physical and moral differences that distinguish the Earth's various races come from?
From climate, lifestyle, and custom. The same would happen if two siblings from the same mother were each raised differently and far apart. They would show no moral resemblance to each other.
Question number 53. Did humankind first appear at various points on the globe?
Yes, but at different periods, which is another cause of human race diversity. Later, humankind spread throughout the different climatic zones, and new types arose in the course of interbreeding between different races.
Sub-question number 53. Do these different races imply distinct species?
Certainly not. All are of the same family. Do the different varieties of the same fruit mean that they do not all belong to the same species?
Question number 54. Since the various human types have not all come from the same ancestor, mightn't they cease to regard one another as brothers and sisters?
All are brothers and sisters in God because they are animated by the same Spirit and strive towards the same goal. You always want to take words literally.
The plurality of worlds. Question number 55. Are all the globes spinning through space inhabited?
Yes, and contrary to what the earthlings believe, they themselves are far from being first in intelligence, goodness, and perfection. Nevertheless, there are individuals who think they know the whole truth of the matter and imagine that this little planet is the only one privileged enough to be inhabited by reasoning beings. Pride and vanity. They fancy that God has created the universe only for earthlings.
Author's remarks for question number 55. God has populated all worlds with living beings, all working toward the final objective of providence. To believe that living beings are limited only to their own particular spot in the universe is to doubt the wisdom of God. However, God has never made anything without a purpose, and must have intended these worlds to fulfill a more important role than simply entertaining our eyes. Moreover, there is nothing in the Earth's position, size, or composition that could reasonably support the notion that, to the exclusion of many thousands of similar worlds, it alone is privileged with being inhabited. Question number 56. Is the physical composition of all the different globes the same?
No, they do not resemble one another at all.
Question number 57. Since the physical composition of all the various worlds is not the same, do the beings inhabiting them have a different physical organization?
Of course, just as on yours, fish are made for living in the water and birds for living in the air.
Question number 58. Do the worlds furthest from the sun lack light and heat, since the sun would appear only as a distant star to them?
Do you believe that the sun is the only source of light and heat? What about electricity? On some worlds, electricity plays a role unknown to you, which is much more important than the role it plays on Earth. Besides, we have never said that all beings are made of the same matter as you, with organs similar to yours.
Author's remarks for question number 58. The existence of beings on the various worlds depends on the appropriate environmental conditions in which they are intended to live. If we had never seen fish, we would not understand how certain beings could live in the water. The same applies to other worlds, which no doubt contain elements unknown to us. On the Earth itself, do we not see the long polar nights being illuminated by the electricity of the aurora borealis? On other worlds, is it not possible that electricity is more abundant than on ours and performs a general role with effects we cannot comprehend? Hence, it could well be that those worlds self-contain the light and the heat sources required by their inhabitants.
Dear listener, this is it for today, and we hope you have found very useful the tips and hints throughout the whole program, because Kardec Radio is here really to nourish your soul. We have listeners in more than 61 countries around the world, and we're very happy and joyful to know that people are really sharing the news, that Kardec Radio is here to teach them about Spiritism, bring them news about the good things that are happening around the world, and bringing new hope to all of us. No matter the challenges we face in life, there is always a new hope. Faith is the mother of hope and charity. And we would like to wrap up the program today as we're talking about family. We're talking about issues in our families. Who doesn't have them? We all do. And those who deny that they do are probably the ones that need the most therapy. We would like to share that in the Gospel according to Spiritism, there is a specific prayer under the subtitle, During Life's Afflictions. Whenever we face affliction, and who doesn't nowadays, the world is really challenging us, Chapter 28, Item 26, and then Item 27, bring us a prayer for when we are feeling life's afflictions. Allan Kardec explains, we can ask God for earthly favors, and He may grant them to us if they have a useful and serious purpose. However, since we judge the usefulness of things from our own point of view, and since our vision is limited to the present, we do not always see the bad side of what we desire. God, who sees better than we do, and who wants only our good, may thus refuse us, just as a father refuses to give his child what might be harmful. If what we have asked for is not granted, we must not become discouraged. On the contrary, we ought to think that the refusal of what we desire is being imposed on us as a trial or expiation, atonement, and that our reward will be proportional to the resignation with which we will have borne it. When he talks resignation, he's talking about surrender. So then let us pray. Allan Kardec has this short but powerful prayer that we can use in our life's afflictions. Let us raise our thoughts, feeling the presence of God and allowing God to care for each one of us. Almighty Father, who sees our misery, deign to listen favorably to the pleas we send you at this moment. If our request is inappropriate, forgive us. If it is just and useful in your sight, may good spirits who carry out your will come to our aid for its fulfillment. Whatever may come our way, dear God, may your will be done. If our desires are not heeded, it is because it is within your designs to test us, and we submit ourselves without complaint. Enable us not to become discouraged by this, and may neither our faith nor our surrender be shaken. Dear listener, these are Kardec's words in the format of a prayer. You can find more and more in the collection of prayers, chapter 28 of the Gospel According to Spiritism. Prayer is very powerful, and sooner or later we'll find relief for the problems and life struggles. For now, would like to share with you that next week the program is dedicated completely to saying yes to life. We're going to talk about abortion, the Spiritist view on abortion, and we're going to talk about what to do when we are pregnant, what to do in regards to the spiritual, psychological care we need to observe during that critical time in our lives. For now, we wish you lots of blessing during this week, hoping that your family heals from its struggles. Many blessings.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.